My husband, Alfred Wexler, always insisted on a child-free life, claiming he disliked children, yet for his own gratification, he consistently refused to use protection. In just 3 years, I endured 6 miscarriages. Each time, I desperately hoped for a different outcome, but the heartbreak returned, again and again. The 7th time I became pregnant, the doctor delivered news that completely shattered me. I would never be able to conceive again. My body had simply endured too much. Before I could even process that devastating loss, Alfred arrived home with a vibrant, visibly pregnant college girl named Melissa. Instead of offering comfort, Alfred smiled and made a suggestion that nearly stole my breath. You should quit your job. She bought one of my sculptures at an auction, and that money paid for our new place. Take good care of her. Everything we do now is for a brighter future, together. I stared at him, searching for any sign that this was a cruel joke. It wasn't. Before I could even mention divorce, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my billionaire father with whom I hadn't spoken in years. Today is the final day of the 3-year test. A 3-year test. What test? If Melissa was my father's daughter, then who was I? Alfred had personally arranged everything at the new place, a lavish, open-plan apartment. All I had to do was pack and move in. At first, he treated me exceptionally well, helping me out of bed, preparing healthy meals, and acting as if I were delicate porcelain. But whenever I hinted at intimacy, he would remind me of my miscarriages, saying I still needed to heal. I didn't understand until Melissa walked in. She looked eerily like me, same face shape, same hair, only her visibly rounded, prominent belly marked the difference. She appeared to be about 6 or 7 months along. Alfred pulled me aside and explained with forced patience that this was a good thing, that I should be supportive, and that it was all part of a bigger plan. I stared at him, numb, not bothering to argue. I already knew who Melissa was. I quietly packed my suitcase and was about to walk out the door when Alfred abruptly shoved me into the kitchen. She prefers mild food, no chili, don't make anything too oily, think of the baby. He didn't even glance back as he walked off to dote on her. I prepared the meal in silence. The counter was covered in fresh vegetables and a slab of beef. I hesitated. For 6 years, I had earned a living selling beef pasta. With that income, I opened an art studio for Alfred. I even paid for a small 2-bedroom apartment for us. But the day he received the deed, he walked into my workplace, shut down my live stream in front of everyone, and then told the restaurant owner I was quitting. He swore he'd never let me touch beef again. Yet here I was, cooking beef once more. When I brought out the food, Alfred and Melissa were already seated. He smiled and told me to bring soup for her. This bone broth is good for the complexion. Helena's specialty is beef. You'll love it. Melissa took the bowl, sniffed it, and immediately recoiled. Alfred, it smells awful. That porky stench. I can't. I'm going to be sick. Alfred jumped up, rubbed her back, and offered her water. I'll ask Helena to make something else. Melissa waved him off. No, don't bother. That stench is her. You should really hire a new nanny. Nanny, I clenched my fists, on the verge of exploding, when Alfred grabbed my wrist, not in anger, but with urgency. Just hold on. When she gives birth, this will all be over. If we treat her well, it'll be easier. But if this is too much for you, go back to the old house. I'll take care of everything here. I slowly removed my apron and threw it at him. Then I tossed a copy of our divorce papers into his lap. He shredded them right in front of me. I don't agree, he said calmly. Everything I did for us. You're pushing me away. Behind him, Melissa called his name, her voice sweet and urgent. He stuffed the torn papers into my hands and muttered, I'll drop by when I have time. Melissa's child had only suffered a minor injury and was recovering quickly. 2 days before the baby's welcome party, she returned to the Mackey family residence in Boston. I couldn't bring myself to face my father, so I stayed with Kieran instead. Kieran and I had known each other since childhood. Our families had once arranged for us to be married. Strangely, being with him now was easier than I remembered. Sometimes I wondered why I had ever given Alfred a chance. Maybe because the unfamiliar always seems tempting until you've had enough. As we drove, Kieran glanced at me. This is your first time seeing Melissa since then, right? I nodded. She used to message me a lot, he said. I treated her like a sister because of your father. Then one day she confessed and asked to marry me. When I declined, she disappeared. She used her credit cards non-stop. She even sent me that pregnancy photo privately. I gave Kieran a sympathetic look and smiled. Melissa had returned to Boston with Alfred, but she took the master bedroom while he was relegated to the guest room. he didn't seem to mind. He was too busy marveling at the luxurious estate, treating the garden and walls like museum pieces. The house was styled like an old European castle. Even the cracks on the exterior were intentional. But it didn't take long before the staff began mocking him. Melissa joined them, calling him a country bumpkin to his face. He just smiled, and the whispers began about me. Helena Mackey is back. Melissa was smart. She picked a weak man, and got pregnant. The child might inherit everything. I heard Helena can't have children anymore. She's done. The Mackey legacy now rests with Melissa. And as Melissa basked in that attention, I descended the staircase slowly, wearing a designer gown with a long train, the hem snagged on a shelf. A vase toppled and shattered. Alfred knew exactly where his artwork was displayed. The crash brought him running. How careless. Melissa spent a fortune on that vase, he ranted, scolding the air until he saw my face. And froze. Helena, you are here, he stammered. Working as a servant. I said nothing, just stood tall. You are too proud for your own good. You could have stayed with me. Now, look at you, ruining vases you can't even afford to replace. I laughed, brushing shards off my gown. Alfred's life savings couldn't buy one of my custom dresses. Then my father walked in from the garden. He beckoned Alfred over, who quickly distanced himself from me. Mr. Mackey, I don't know her. She broke the vase. I was just trying to help. My father chuckled. How could you not know her? One day your child will call her aunt. As the heavy door closed behind me, sealing Alfred out, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. No more pretending. No more hoping he'd become the man I once believed in. And thank God we never had children. I walked slowly to the old apartment, the one I had bought with my own hard-earned money after selling beef pasta on street corners. Before that, Alfred and I had rented shabby places together. Whenever the landlord kicked us out, we'd wander the streets all night to save on hotel costs. He'd give me his thickest coat, wearing only his undershirt, just to keep me warm. Back then, I believed he was selfless, that he loved me. Whenever we had meat for dinner, he would place the best cuts on my plate, telling me to eat well so I'd be strong and healthy. I thought we were building a future together. That's why I gave up my family, my wealth, and even my father's approval for him. Everything in that tiny apartment had been chosen by us. The flowers on the balcony, my favorites. Alfred didn't even like plants, yet he watered them for me, at least he used to. But now all the flower pots were either broken, blown over by the wind, or dried out beyond saving. Not even the cacti survived. I turned on the faucet to water them, but nothing came out. I had forgotten the utilities hadn't been paid in weeks. That evening my phone rang. It was Alfred. On instinct, picked up. Before I could say anything, he exploded. I thought you were understanding, but you're just selfish and petty. I told you not to cook anything that could harm the baby. Melissa's been throwing up nonstop. If anything happens to her or the baby, it'll be on you. I stood there in silence, stunned. I hadn't done anything wrong, but Alfred had already made up his mind. You don't even sound sorry, he barked, then hung up. The next morning, I received a call from the restaurant where I used to work. A mob of angry customers had gathered outside, claiming they got sick, vomiting and diarrhea after eating my signature beef pasta. Even though I had already quit, rumors were spreading fast. People said I'd run off to avoid taking responsibility. I didn't defend myself. I just went straight to the restaurant and bowed deeply to every angry customer. How much compensation do you want? I asked calmly. $40,000 each. $70,000. $100,000. Name your price. They quieted down, surprised. I pulled out my phone and asked the loudest man there for his bank details. He looked confused but eventually gave them. Life is priceless, he muttered. But since you're so sincere, $100,000 will do. I was about to confirm the transfer when Alfred stormed into the restaurant, his face twisted in fury. What are you doing? That money is for our mortgage. I didn't stop. I entered my password, and the payment went through. He snatched the phone from my hand, eyes wide with panic. Melissa's baby is fine now. If you just apologize to her, she'll clear everything up. Don't make a scene. I turned to him slowly. Have you forgotten that I've been pregnant too? When I was vomiting all day and night, weren't you the one who said I should get rid of the baby? Can't you tell the difference between morning sickness and food poisoning, or are you pretending not to? Alfred froze. I sent money to every complainant. Then I walked to the front, printed a fresh copy of our divorce papers, and left them on the counter before walking out. A few days later, he called again. It was all a misunderstanding, he claimed. Melissa has forgiven you. She even wants you to make another beef soup and bring it over. I glanced down at the flower pots. now stuffed into black trash bags. I ended the call and blocked his number. Dead plants don't come back to life, they have to be thrown away. Later, I handed the keys to the old house to a real estate agent. I was ready to leave everything behind, but just before booking my flight, I realized I had forgotten something important. My ID and some jewelry still locked in the safe at the new apartment. I returned quietly. The door code had been changed. My fingerprint no longer worked. I used the spare key. As soon as I stepped inside, I froze. On the living room sofa were Alfred and Melissa, in a position no words could soften. Their voices blurred into static in my ears, but one line cut through. "You're just as tempting as that." "First night," Alfred whispered. So it was never about children. He hadn't hated the idea of being a father. He had only hated the idea of being a father to my child. Everything made sense now. The lies, the distance, the manipulation. I pushed my suitcase against the doorframe, making a loud noise. Startled, Alfred jumped up and rushed Melissa into the bathroom. I went to the bedroom, straight to the safe. He followed and tried to stop me, his arms wrapping around my waist. His hug used to comfort me. Now it made my skin crawl. "Let go," I said coldly. "It's not what you think," he murmured. I looked it up. It's normal for pregnant women to need physical affection. It calms them. She and we don't have feelings for each other. I laughed, bitter and hollow. "You think I'm that stupid?" I kicked him hard in the groin. He doubled over, gasping. "You want to be honest? Then let's be honest," he wheezed. She was already pregnant when she came to me. I didn't mean for this to happen. My parents were pressuring me for a grandchild. I figured if she had the baby, we could all move on. You wouldn't even have to raise it. "You mean I wouldn't have to suffer the pain of childbirth, but you'd still get your heir?" I snapped. He nodded as if he'd done me a favor. I opened the safe. It was empty. "You took everything." Alfred didn't even flinch. "I bought those pieces after we got married. They're marital property. I have every right to manage them." I reached further inside. No gold bars. The bars were from before we married. "They're mine." He stepped closer. "The baby's due soon. I used everything I had to buy this place. I needed to give her a gift. We have to make sacrifices sometimes." I didn't respond, just asked one last thing. "The emerald pendant wrapped in cloth. My mother's keepsake. Did you take that too?" "No," he said. "Melissa broke it by accident. She said it was invaluable." He handed me the bag. Inside, the pendant was cracked in 3 places. I stared at it in silence. "It's not gone," he said. "It's just damaged." I placed it carefully into my purse, grabbed my ID, and prepared to leave. Melissa asked me to apologize on her behalf. "She knows you're kind and won't hold this against her, so I forgave her for you." I looked at him and burst out laughing, not a happy laugh, not even an angry one, a laugh of pure disbelief. "You've handled everything, haven't you?" I said, my voice trembling. "Then there's nothing left to talk about." Alfred smiled, thinking he'd calmed me down. "I knew you were the sensible one." He reached for my arm again. "Once the baby is born, we'll hold a welcome party. That way we'll officially have a child. We can move forward with our lives." He said it like I should be grateful, like I should feel lucky to raise a child that wasn't mine, from a woman who took everything from me. As he spoke about having children, his eyes gleamed with hope, but he had forgotten. He had forgotten about the 7 pregnancies I lost. Forgotten that I once carried his child and he couldn't even be bothered to hold my hand in the hospital. Forgotten all the grief, the pain, the shattered dreams. Why would I ever want to be a mother to another woman's child, especially hers? I said nothing and walked out the door. Everything in that new house belonged to Alfred. Not a single item reflected who I was, my taste, my life, my pain. It was all erased. I felt like a guest in my own existence. I wanted to go home. On my way to the airport, I received a message from Alfred. "Send me the beef pasta recipe." Melissa suddenly craved it. She said your version was the best. I stared at the screen for a moment, then I blocked him on every platform. Seconds later, a new message arrived from my father. "Today is the final day of the 3-year test." So it had all been a test. I met Alfred in college. My mother had passed away early, and my father, despite being one of the richest men in the country, was a strict and distant man. He raised me with clear rules: don't show off wealth, live simply, observe quietly. Alfred had no money, no car, no job, but he had a gentle heart and a warm smile. He was kind to me, ambitious, always working hard. That's what I fell in love with, or thought I did. I lived as his ordinary girlfriend for 3 years. After graduation, he still had nothing, no house, no future, but I loved him. I argued with my father and cut ties with him just to marry Alfred. I even changed my surname, refusing help from my family. For over a year, I survived by selling beef pasta on the streets, barely affording rent. When I proved I could live that life, my father agreed. If Alfred can remain stable, decent, and loyal for 3 years after the wedding, he told me, then I will accept him as my son-in-law. But Alfred failed completely. When I got off the plane, someone was waiting at the gate with a bouquet of roses. In all 6 years with Alfred, I had never once received flowers. He always said they were a waste of money. I looked up and saw Kieran smiling gently. He handed me the roses without saying a word. I took a deep breath and accepted them. He looked at me and asked, "Did my dad send you here to talk to me? I'm exhausted. I just want to go to a hotel." Kieran didn't answer directly. He wrapped his arm around my shoulder gently. "I've been studying traditional medicine," he said. "You should take better care of yourself." Instead of a hotel, he drove me to a rehabilitation center. I didn't argue. It didn't matter where I was, as long as I could rest. There I was given warm meals, a cozy room, and a care plan for physical and emotional recovery. I had time to think, time to understand. Sitting at a small wooden table, eating steamed fish and lightly sautéed vegetables, I had a sudden thought. Alfred never once made me a balanced meal. All those so-called healthy dishes were just greasy shortcuts. They were never about me. I logged into a different Facebook account, one Alfred didn't know existed. The moment I opened it, unread messages poured in. Most were from old friends, but one name stood out, Melissa. She had messaged me over and over again. She was the secret daughter of my father's ex-girlfriend, an illegitimate child born in secret and raised under her mother's surname. When her mother brought her to meet the family, I wasn't there. Somehow, Melissa got my contact information and began messaging me like we were close. "Helena, are you coming home soon? Dad really misses you. We share the same father, so we're sisters. Let me know when you're back so we can catch up." I opened her public profile. The first thing I saw was a video, her pregnant belly being rubbed lovingly with stretch mark oil. A man's hands, Alfred's hands, appeared in the frame. In the background, her voice, "I'm so happy." Scrolling further back, I saw dozens of travel photos, beach vacations, shopping trips, romantic dinners. Alfred appeared in everyone, just never directly tagged. All of this during the months he told me he was away on work trips. They had been together longer than I thought. Months later, she posted a new photo, her and a newborn baby. I clicked like within seconds. She messaged me, "Helena, are you home now? I just gave birth to a healthy baby boy. As his aunt, don't forget to bring a gift." I replied, "Of course. Since he's Dad's first grandson, I'll prepare something special." Melissa bombarded me with excited emotions. Kieran, who had just finished handling my discharge papers, raised an eyebrow at me. "Why are you smiling like that?" "I feel much better now," I said, closing the app. "That's all." He nodded. "Good, because I have a favor to ask." We traveled together to Austin, a second-tier city where I once attended university. It was where I started selling beef pasta and later launched my first live streaming business. I knew the local food scene well. Kieran had been hired to oversee a new mall and invited me to be the food and beverage consultant. It was perfect. We landed and went straight to the site. After a long morning walking through the mall, I excused myself to use the restroom. When I came out, I saw someone I hadn't expected, Alfred. He was waiting outside the nursing room, holding a maternity bag for Melissa. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. He rushed over. "Helena, why did you block me on everything?" He glanced nervously at the door, making sure Melissa wasn't nearby. "The baby's naming ceremony is next week. It's also the welcome party. You have to come." I didn't answer. He looked tired, older. Melissa clearly treated him more like a servant than a partner. He pointed to a nearby baby boutique. "Are you buying a present too? The baby things are so cute, right?" I smiled coldly. "Yeah, they're cute. Too bad my children never lived long enough to use them." Just as Alfred was about to speak again, Melissa's voice echoed from the hallway. "Alfred, come help me carry the maternity bag." He froze, looked back nervously, then turned toward the nursing room without another word. Moments later, Melissa emerged first, holding the baby in her arms. She raised an eyebrow at me, instantly shifting into a smug smile. "You're Alfred's ex-wife, right?" she asked as if she didn't already know the answer. I met her gaze, calm and unwavering. "That's right. So when you called me the nanny that day, was that just for fun, or were you trying to get under my skin?" Her fake smile faded. With Alfred out of sight, Melissa dropped her polite act entirely. "No man likes a woman with no charm. You never had anything that could keep him around." I smiled faintly. Charm doesn't always mean seduction, sometimes it's just money. That struck a nerve, her lips twisted in frustration. Then, unexpectedly, she shoved the baby into my arms. Startled, I instinctively caught the child, but the sudden weight caused me to stumble, and the baby slipped from my grasp, landing on the soft carpeted floor with a small cry. Alfred burst out of the room, panicked. He shoved me aside and scooped up the baby. "What are you doing?" he shouted, fury burning in his eyes. "If the baby gets hurt, you'll go to jail. Are you trying to harm him on purpose?" I stood there speechless. I hadn't done anything wrong, but it didn't matter. In Alfred's eyes, I was always the villain. Melissa dropped to her knees in front of me, sobbing. "I'm sorry, I just thought the baby things were expensive, so I asked you to make a handmade gift instead. I didn't mean to upset you." Her act was flawless, fake guilt, crocodile tears, and a trembling voice that made everyone around us believe I was the monster. I clenched my jaw. "Stop acting, Melissa. I never touched that child. You pushed him." Alfred slapped me across the face. The sharp crack echoed through the hallway. My skin stung, but I didn't flinch. I raised my hand and slapped him once, then twice. "One for you, one for her," I said coldly. "You never signed the divorce papers, but I've already filed the lawsuit. Adultery is still adultery, Alfred. You're not getting out of this." He stepped back, stunned, as I pulled out my phone and called the emergency hotline. "There are cameras in the hallway. Review the footage." The child fell after she pushed him into my arms. "Take the baby to the hospital, don't waste time." Alfred opened his mouth to protest, but the fear in his eyes said everything. If something happened to that baby, his fantasy life with Melissa would be over. I turned my back on both of them and left. That night, whispers started circulating within the Mackey estate. Everyone knew now that I had returned, but no one dared approach me directly. Instead, I overheard hushed voices in the corridors. I heard Helena Mackey's back, and she looks more beautiful than ever. Melissa tried to steal her life, but you can't replace a real daughter with a counterfeit. Melissa did everything she could to maintain control, but no matter how hard she tried, her lies began to crumble. At the welcome party, the grand chandelier sparkled above a lavish hall full of guests, businessmen, family members, and the press. I wore a sleek black dress that hugged my figure with understated elegance, a dress custom-made in Paris. It's worth greater than everything Alfred ever gave me. As I stepped forward, I accidentally knocked into a display shelf. The same vase Melissa once bragged about smashed to pieces on the floor. Gasps filled the room. Alfred rushed over in a panic, eyes wide. "Do you know how expensive that was? Melissa spent a fortune at auction for it. You couldn't pay that back even if you worked your whole life." I simply brushed the shards off my dress and replied, "This old thing, I had someone buy it for her at the auction. It's one of the cheapest pieces here. A servant could replace it with 6 months of salary." Alfred's face turned pale. At that moment, my father entered the room. Alfred panicked and took a step back. "I don't know her," he blurted. "She broke the vase." "I was just..." My father raised a hand. "How could you not know her? One day your child will call her aunt." Melissa's eyes widened. Her expression turned from superiority to shock in a split second. The guests were stunned. The whispers grew louder. I saw Alfred's lips tremble. Aunt, that one word shattered everything he thought he knew. It had always been a secret in elite circles. My father had 2 daughters, one legitimate, one hidden. After I left home, he never spoke of me again. Most people assumed I had been disowned. Melissa had used that silence to weave her lies. She made herself the center of attention, the promising heir. But now the truth was walking straight through the door. In designer heels and red lipstick, I looked down at the broken vase, then back up at Alfred and Melissa. "You know," I said calmly, "when someone tries too hard to steal your place, it's usually because they know deep down they'll never have your worth." As I turned to walk away, a pair of strong arms lifted me off the ground. Kieran, he had seen me teetering and caught me in a gentle embrace. "Don't hurt yourself," he whispered. My arms slipped around his neck as he carried me through the stunned crowd. Alfred's eyes widened with rage as he lunged forward, but the bodyguard stepped in before he could take a single step closer. "You shameless woman," he screamed. "We're still married, and you are already throwing yourself into another man's arms." The guests gasped. I raised my head from Kieran's shoulder and replied, "We've been over for a long time. You just refused to accept it. You've been pretending to be poor this whole time," Alfred yelled. "Just because I was broke, you gave up on me. I made a mistake with Melissa, but I only wanted to take responsibility. That proves I'm a man." I laughed softly. "No, Alfred, that proves you're a fool." And right on cue his phone rang. He picked it up, fumbled, and turned ghostly pale. Mr. Wexler, said a cold voice on the other end. Since you failed to appear in court, the divorce has been processed by default. You are now officially divorced. Please collect your divorce certificate at your earliest convenience. Silence fell across the room, Melissa still clutching her magazines on the walls. Everything smelled of success, earned success. We've prepared baby, stood frozen. She had thought she won, but she never understood the game, and I had just flipped. The board, Melissa stood stiff as a statue, her knuckles white from clutching the baby. When our eyes met across the room, I could see the panic behind her carefully painted smile. She never expected me, the supposedly discarded daughter of the Mackey family, the woman she mocked as a nanny, to be the one walking out of that court battle with a divorce certificate in hand, and the crowd at my back. But more than that, she hadn't expected Kieran. Her gaze kept flicking between us, not to me, but to him, to Kieran, whose presence had shifted everything. His arms still wrapped protectively around me, his body between me and the man I used to love, and that's what broke her. Suddenly, Melissa shoved the child into Alfred's arms and ran toward us, tears streaming down her face. Kieran, I was wrong. Please, I mean it this time. I only had a baby with another man because I thought you didn't want me. I did it all for your attention. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Alfred looked stunned. Melissa dropped to her knees. Please, Kieran. Helena can't have children. Our family needs. I'm the only one who can give you that. Let me fix this. Let's start over. Kieran's expression turned cold as stone. That's enough. His words cut through her desperation like a blade. I've never liked you, Melissa. Not once. I helped you out of respect for Mr. Mackey, nothing more, and I never gave you a reason to think it was anything else. Melissa blinked, stunned, but she didn't give up. Her eyes darted toward me as she crawled on her knees, grabbing my hands. Helena, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to steal your man. Alfred tricked me. He told me he was single. I didn't know he was still married. When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. Please, take Alfred back. I just want Kieran. I pulled my hands away from hers and looked her dead in the eyes. This isn't a garbage dump. I don't take back what others have thrown away. The crowd gasped again, and even Alfred flinched. Kieran met my gaze. His face flushed slightly. He didn't expect me to be so direct. Neither did I, but the moment felt right. I turned to him and asked, clear and calm, do you like me? His cheeks reddened, but he didn't look away. I do. I smiled, leaned up, and kissed him softly on the cheek, leaving a bold red lipstick mark. His ears turned red instantly. My father stepped forward from the edge of the crowd and cleared his throat. I'd like to make an announcement, he said, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. This party isn't just to celebrate the birth of my grandson, he said, pausing, eyes locked on me, but more importantly, to welcome Helena back to the family. He looked at Kieran and added, and I'm thrilled to share that Helena and Kieran are getting married. I hope you'll all join me in congratulating them. The crowd erupted in stunned murmurs. Flashbulbs went off. People clapped out of obligation, not knowing how else to respond. Melissa collapsed. Literally, her knees gave out, and she crumpled to the ground. And then, chaos. In a flash of madness, she grabbed the baby from Alfred's arms and hurled him toward the ground. The baby cried once, then fell silent. Everyone screamed. Kieran, I'm sorry, Melissa wailed. The baby's gone, but now there's nothing stopping us. Please forgive me. I really can't live without you. Kieran didn't respond. He didn't scream. He didn't argue. He calmly pulled out his phone and called the police. Please, come pick her up. She's no longer welcome here. The bodyguards moved in, gently taking the baby from Alfred and escorting Melissa out. Still screaming and sobbing like a woman completely unhinged, and just like that, I became the center of the party. All eyes were on me, some in awe, some in envy, some in shame. I didn't care. Alfred, still standing near the stairs, looked like a man shattered. He stared blankly at the bloodstain on the floor where his illusion of a perfect family had just exploded. As I passed him, he dropped to his knees. Helena, I'm sorry. I don't deserve to be called a man. He slapped himself hard, once, then again, until his face was red and swollen. No one stopped him. No one pitied him. Eventually, the bodyguards dragged him away. My heart didn't flinch. He had made his choices, and now he was living the consequences. A few weeks later, Kieran and I were married. The ceremony was held on Aspen Mountain in Colorado, my favorite place in the world. The wind was gentle, the sky clear, and golden sunlight warmed our faces as we exchanged our vows. It was simple, elegant, and intimate, just how I wanted it. As I looked into Kieran's eyes, I finally understood what it meant to marry someone who saw me not for what I could offer or what I had lost, but for who I really was. Being a good couple isn't just about money or appearances or legacy, it's about understanding, connection, trust. When life breaks you, the right person doesn't walk away. They stay, they carry you, and they remind you you were never broken too. Begin with. Our wedding reception was quiet and warm, just like Kieran and I had planned. I gave a short toast, thanked the guests, and that was it. No drama, no extravagant spectacle, just joy, sincerity, and peace. For our honeymoon, Kieran surprised me. He booked 2 plane tickets to Austin. When we landed, I stood outside the airport and took a long, deep breath of the air that once smelled like struggle and sweat. It had been 6 years since I first set foot there, trying to build something out of nothing, and now I was returning, not as a broke girl selling pasta, but as the founder of a food empire and the daughter of one of the richest men in the country. How did you know this was the place I missed the most? I asked Kieran. He smiled and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Because this is where your roots are. No matter how far people go, they always miss the place where they first learned to grow. I smiled back. We took a cab straight to the restaurant where it all started, my first beef pasta shop. Back then, I used a tiny rented store with mismatched chairs and a faulty stove. But now I walked in as the owner. The team rushed to greet me. The manager, a woman I had hired years ago when I could barely afford help, beamed with pride. Ms. Mackey, you're finally here. You don't know how much we owe you. Ever since you added the live streaming model and even went live yourself, business has exploded. We've opened several new branches. I looked around. The once cramped dining area now had polished wood panels, soft lighting, and framed reviews from major culinary everything you requested. The manager added. I nodded and glanced at Kieran. Without a word, he grabbed an apron and tied it around my waist, then pulled one on himself. This might get greasy, he said. If it's too much, I'll take over. He rolled up his sleeves, picked up a cut of beef, and began working beside me. It's not too greasy, he added with a wink. I'm wearing gloves. His warmth never felt performative. He didn't do it for praise or attention. He did it because he wanted to be by my side. As I chopped up the beef and tossed it into the sizzling pan, Kieran stood beside me, talking into the livestream camera. Within minutes, the viewership spiked. Orders poured in. Lines stretched down the street. About half an hour later, Kieran stepped away, peeled off his gloves, and gently massaged my shoulders. Time to let your staff handle it. You're the boss. Now, they won't learn if you do everything yourself. I laughed softly and nodded. He walked over to the register, pulled out a sleek black card, and swiped it. Mackie and I just got married. He told the staff and customers. Everything's on the house today. Eat as much as you want. Enjoy. The crowd erupted in cheers, but not everyone was celebrating. Standing near the end of the line was Alfred. His face was tired, older, and thinner. He had been waiting for nearly an hour just to get a plate of the beef pasta he once mocked me for making. Just as he stepped to the front, Kieran took my hand and led me out the back. We didn't say a word. We didn't have to. From a distance, I looked back one last time. Alfred was sitting alone at a small table, silently eating a bowl of pasta, my recipe, the same dish he once banned me from making, the one that paid our rent, opened our studio, and built the foundation of everything he took for granted. Now he was eating it alone. No wife, no smile, no future. I had once loved him so deeply I would have set myself on fire to keep him warm. Now I wouldn't even offer him a match. Not because I hated him, but because I'd finally learned the difference between being kind and being a fool. And I was done being a fool. As the restaurant doors closed behind us, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel powerful or victorious. I just felt free. Kieran and I walked through the streets of Austin, hand in hand, watching the sunset paint the buildings in golden hues. It felt surreal to be here again, on the very same streets where I once stood exhausted and covered in beef grease, handing out flyers to strangers. The difference was, this time I wasn't alone. Later that evening, as we sat on the balcony of our hotel suite overlooking the city, Kieran gently placed his hand over mine. Are you really okay? He asked. I turned to him and nodded. For the first time in years, I actually feel like myself again. He leaned back and stared at the stars. It's strange, isn't it, how much we're willing to tolerate when we think it's love? That struck me deeply. With Alfred, I had mistaken endurance for devotion. I had confused sacrifice with commitment. I thought love meant giving up everything for someone else, even my self-worth. But now, sitting beside Kieran, I realized love didn't have to hurt. and didn't have to be proven by pain. The next morning, I received an email. It was from the legal department handling Alfred's fraud investigation. Fraud, I opened the message. Apparently, after the divorce ruling, a deep dive into Alfred's financial records revealed that he had been selling my gold bars and jewelry to cover personal debts and had falsely reported some of my business earnings as his own. Worse, he had attempted to forge my signature on a property transfer document that would have handed over partial ownership of the Austin restaurant to Melissa. I forwarded the documents to my father. He replied within minutes. "Do you want me to handle it?" "No," I wrote back, cold and clear. "Let the law do its job. I've wasted enough time on people who thought I was weak." By midday, Alfred was served. Kieran and I watched from the cafe window as a process server approached him. Alfred had just ordered another bowl of beef pasta when he was handed the envelope. His eyes widened, his hands shook. He tried to protest, but the server had already turned and walked away. I didn't smile. I didn't even feel sorry. He had dug his own grave, dishonesty after dishonesty, betrayal after betrayal. I had only stopped covering the hole. Later that day, I received another message, this time from Melissa. It was long and emotional, full of excuses and regret. She told me she never meant for things to go this far, that she truly loved Alfred at first, but when she realized he still had feelings for me, she panicked. That she was jealous of the way Kieran looked at me and wanted someone to look at her the same way. I didn't reply. She ended her message with, "Please, if you ever forgive me, let me know. I've lost everything." I closed the chat without typing a single word. I had given too many people too many chances already. Forgiveness isn't free, it's earned. A few days later, Kieran and I were invited to speak at a business conference in Austin, he as an investor, me as a case study in grassroots entrepreneurship. As I stood on stage, looking out at the packed room, I thought of every late night I had spent crying on cold tile floors, every insult I had endured in silence, every moment I questioned if I was enough. And yet here I was, still standing, thriving, whole. I began my speech not with numbers but with truth. I used to think success meant being chosen by someone who didn't see my worth until it was convenient. Now I know true success is when you stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. The room fell silent, then came the applause. When I stepped off stage, Kieran was waiting with open arms. "You are incredible," he whispered. I smiled. I just told the truth. We spent the rest of the day meeting vendors, chatting with small business owners, and scouting new locations. Before leaving the venue, a young woman came up to me, holding a notepad and shaking slightly. "Ms. Mackey, your story. I was in an abusive relationship for 2 years. Your words gave me the strength to leave. Thank you." I hugged her without hesitation. "You don't need to wait for someone to save you," I told her. "You already have everything you need." She nodded, eyes glossy, and walked away taller than before. As we drove home that evening, Kieran turned to me and said, "You know, you've become someone people look up to." I chuckled softly. "I'm still learning." He reached for my hand. "That's what makes you different. You don't pretend to have all the answers, but you walk anyway, and that's what makes people follow." I looked out the window, the skyline of Austin glowing in the distance, and I thought of everything I had lost. Then I thought of everything I had gained, and I realized sometimes you don't need revenge, you just need to rise. The following week was quiet, almost like an exhale after years of holding my breath. Kieran and I returned to Boston to wrap up a few lingering matters. While he attended investor meetings, I reviewed old contracts, oversaw the full rebranding of my culinary business, and finally took full ownership of the restaurant chain I had built, now expanded to 7 branches across different cities. As I combed through the legal documents, I found Alfred's name still listed as an honorary co-founder on some public records, a small detail I had once overlooked, but now it felt like a stain I couldn't ignore. I called in my legal team and requested an immediate removal. The lead attorney hesitated. He might challenge it. "Would you like us to prepare for a formal dispute?" "No," I replied. "I want a silent extraction. If he contests, he'll have to face the forged paperwork he signed himself." It didn't take long for Alfred to message me. "If you erase my name, are you erasing everything we shared?" "No," I typed back, cold and clear. "But it will finally reflect who built everything and who almost destroyed it." That same day, a journalist reached out. Someone had leaked details of the divorce, the court ruling, even hints of the financial fraud. Instead of avoiding it, I agreed to give a formal interview, but only on one condition: no victim narrative. I didn't want to be pitied. I wanted to be understood. In the interview, I didn't name names. I didn't speak in anger. I simply told the truth. I spoke about what it means to build something from scratch while being underestimated. I shared how many women poured themselves into relationships, only to be abandoned or betrayed. I talked about how easy it is to lose your voice when you're constantly sacrificing for someone else's dream, and how powerful it feels the moment you realize you can have your own. The interview went viral in less than 24 hours. Thousands of comments flooded in. She said what so many of us feel, this is what strength looks like. I just filed for divorce after 5 years of silence. Thank you, Helena. I read each message with quiet gratitude, not because they validated me, but because they reminded me I wasn't alone, that none of us are. Later that night, Kieran and I sat together on the rooftop terrace of our townhouse. He held a glass of wine in one hand and my hand in the other. You really have no idea how many people you're helping just by being yourself, he said. I looked up at the stars. I didn't plan to inspire anyone. I just refused to disappear. That's why they listen, he replied. Because you didn't just survive, you evolved. For a moment, I let that truth settle inside me. He was right. I wasn't the same woman who had once begged Alfred not to leave her. I wasn't the girl who once cried in a restaurant kitchen while folding divorce papers with greasy hands. I was something else now, and I hadn't even reached the peak of who I could become. A few days later, Kieran and I flew to New York to meet with potential investors interested in franchising the restaurant. One of them, a seasoned venture capitalist, looked at me and said, I've reviewed your story. Your numbers are strong, but what I'm more impressed by is the loyalty your brand commands. You're not just selling food, you're selling resilience. I smiled. I'm not selling anything, I'm just living. The rest is seasoning. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in our hotel suite, same face, same eyes, but no longer hiding. Behind them, for the first time in my life, I saw not who I had been, but who I had become. The New York trip marked the beginning of something bigger than I could have imagined. Within weeks, 3 franchise deals were signed. Each contract gave me creative control, and each partner understood that the brand wasn't just about food. It was about rebuilding identity through simplicity and truth. I named the new division Mackie Roots, a nod to where it all began, beef pasta on a street corner, and to who I was before everything fell apart. The night we launched the flagship location in Manhattan, Kieran stood beside me in a tailored suit, his arm resting gently around my back. The venue was packed. Reporters, influencers, investors, and even former classmates who had once pitied me when I vanished from the social map after marrying Alfred. Now they all watched as I stood under a spotlight, calm, composed, and absolutely unshakable. I wasn't here to prove them wrong. I was here to prove myself right. My father arrived just before the ribbon-cutting ceremony. He didn't say much, just gave me a long look filled with something between apology and pride. Then he handed me a small box. Inside was a perfectly restored emerald pendant, the one Melissa had broken, the one my mother had left me. I had it. Rebuilt, he said quietly, same gem, new structure, just like you. I swallowed hard, emotions catching in my throat. Thank you, I whispered. He nodded and stepped back, letting me have the moment. I clipped the pendant around my neck and faced the cameras. This business was born from pain, but it's built on purpose. I said into the mic, to every woman who's ever been made to feel disposable, invisible, or replaceable, this space is proof that you can lose everything and still rise. Without asking anyone's permission, flashbulbs lit up the room, applause erupted, and for once, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like a woman who had earned her stage. Later that night, Kieran and I walked home through the streets of New York, just the two of us, our fingers interlocked. Do you ever think about him? He asked suddenly. About Alfred? I paused. Sometimes, not with longing, just reflection. What do you feel? I looked up at the glowing skyline. Nothing, I said honestly. And that's how I know I've healed. A silence fell between us, but it wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. The next morning, I received one last message from Alfred. You win. That was it. No plea for forgiveness. No self-pity, just 2 words. I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message, because it was never about winning. I hadn't walked away to win. I had walked away to survive, and survival led me to peace. I turned to Kieran, who was sipping coffee in bed and scrolling through franchise reports. Do you ever think we rushed into this? I asked. He looked up and smiled. We've known each other since we were kids. I waited years. If anything, I think we took too long. I laughed. Fair enough. He put his tablet down and patted the bed beside him. Come here, I want to tell you something. I climbed in next to him, resting my head on his shoulder. What is it? He pulled a small envelope from under the pillow. Inside was a hand-drawn sketch of our future restaurant headquarters, a stunning building designed with clean lines, a rooftop herb garden, and a culinary school on the top floor. I bought the land, he said. I looked at him in shock. Kieran, I believe in you, in what you've built, but most of all, I believe this is just the beginning. I looked at the drawing again, then back at him. I think I finally believe it too. A few months later, construction began on the Mackie Roots Culinary Centara blend of restaurant, teaching institute, and innovation lab. It stood not only as a symbol of everything I had reclaimed, but of everything I still intended to create. The grand opening was set for spring, and as the final touches were being made, I found myself sitting on a bench in the rooftop herb garden, overlooking the city. The sun had just begun to rise, casting soft gold across the buildings. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, there was no ache in my chest, no unfinished conversations in my head, no need to explain myself to anyone, just silence and clarity. Kieran joined me with 2 mugs of coffee. He sat beside me without saying a word, offering me one. We watched the city wake up together. Then he leaned in and said, "You changed my definition of love, you know." I turned to him, surprised. I used to think love was about protecting someone, shielding them. But with you, it's about standing beside someone who doesn't need protection, just someone who sees them. You never needed saving, Helena, you just needed space to grow. I swallowed the lump in my throat and smiled. And thank you for giving me room to bloom. We held hands as the wind moved softly around us. I looked out at the streets below, once a place of struggle, now the foundation of everything. Suddenly my phone buzzed. It was an email. Subject: urgent, Alfred Wexler. I opened it. A final legal notice. Alfred had fled the country weeks ago, evading a mountain of debt and civil penalties, but recently he'd been caught not by the police, but by reality. He had filed for bankruptcy, alone, forgotten, irrelevant. I stared at the screen for a moment, then closed it and slid the phone back into my pocket. That chapter was finally over. I no longer needed justice. My life was justice. As I stood, Kieran followed, and we began walking along the garden path toward the center's new test kitchen. Students would be arriving soon, eager to learn to cook, to dream. One of them stopped me at the door, young, bright-eyed, full of energy. "Ms. Mackie," she said breathlessly, "I read your story. That's why I applied. I didn't think I'd get in, but here I am." I smiled gently. "You belong here, and remember, your path doesn't define you. What you choose to do next does." She beamed, nodded, and ran inside. Kieran watched her go, then turned to me. "So, what's next, Mrs. Mackie?" I looked at the sun rising higher in the sky and answered simply, "Whatever I want." And this time, it wasn't rebellion. It was truth. No longer a woman scorned, no longer a name buried in someone else's story. I was Helena Mackie, daughter, founder, survivor, visionary, and this was just the beginning.